You lie down tonight, close your eyes, and wait for sleep the way you always have. But it does not come. Not in 10 minutes, not in an hour. Morning arrives and you are still lying there, wide awake, having not slept even a single second. And then it happens again the next night, and the next. What if you never slept again? Not insomnia that eventually breaks, not a rough week. What if the ability to sleep simply switched off inside you, permanently, starting right now? The answer is one of the strangest and most disturbing journeys the human body can take, and it tells us something about sleep that most people never think about, because we spend a third of our lives doing it and almost never ask why. Let's follow it hour by hour, because the timeline matters enormously. The first 24 hours are almost deceptively manageable. You feel tired, irritable, a little foggy, the way anyone feels after a genuinely bad night. Your reaction time slows. Studies conducted by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have found that 24 hours without sleep produces cognitive impairment roughly equivalent to a blood alcohol content of 0.10%, legally drunk in every state in America. You would not be allowed to drive, but you can still function. You can still hold a conversation, make a sandwich, answer an email badly. By hour 36, something more concerning begins. Your body starts producing stress hormones at elevated levels, cortisol climbing steadily, because your body is beginning to treat prolonged wakefulness as an emergency, which biologically it is. Your immune system, which relies heavily on sleep to produce and regulate cytokines, the signaling proteins that coordinate your body's defense against infection, begins to falter. Research published in the journal Sleep has documented that even partial sleep deprivation reduces the effectiveness of vaccines and increases susceptibility to the common cold within just a day or two of disrupted sleep. Extend that disruption indefinitely, and your immune system does not just weaken. It begins a slow, continuous collapse, because sleep is not merely rest for your immune system. It is when your immune system does much of its actual work. By hour 48, something happens that most people have never heard of, and it is one of the strangest phenomena in all of sleep science: microsleeps. Your brain, desperate for the sleep you are denying it, begins forcing tiny fragments of sleep onto you without your consent or awareness. These episodes last only a few seconds, sometimes less, and during them, parts of your brain genuinely fall asleep while other parts remain technically awake. You might be standing, walking, even mid-sentence, and for 1 or 2 seconds, portions of your neural activity shift into a sleep state indistinguishable on an EEG from actual sleep. You will not remember these episodes happening. Your brain will simply skip forward, like a small edit in a film, and you will have no idea that anything occurred. This is precisely why sleep-deprived driving is so catastrophically dangerous, and precisely why researchers at the National Sleep Foundation consider it comparably dangerous to drunk driving. The person experiencing a microsleep does not feel their eyes closing. They simply lose several seconds of the road at 70 miles an hour with zero awareness that it happened. Now imagine this occurring dozens, then hundreds of times a day, indefinitely, with no actual sleep ever occurring to relieve the pressure building behind it. By day 3, roughly 72 hours in, your brain begins to genuinely misfire in ways that go beyond simple fatigue. Perceptual distortions begin. Objects at the edge of your vision seem to shift or move. Your depth perception becomes unreliable. Some people report mild visual hallucinations, not full delusions yet, but the world beginning to feel subtly, unmistakably wrong, the way a dream feels wrong even while you are inside it. Neuroscientists studying prolonged sleep deprivation, including researchers who examined the famous case of Randy Gardner, the American teenager who in 1964 stayed awake for 11 days and 25 minutes as part of a science fair project, documented exactly this progression. By day 3, Gardner was struggling to complete simple mental tasks, misidentifying objects, and showing early signs of paranoia. His case remains one of the most thoroughly documented voluntary sleep deprivation experiments in history, precisely because it revealed how catastrophically the mind deteriorates when denied its most basic maintenance cycle. By day 4 or 5, this is where things become genuinely disturbing. Full hallucinations begin, not the corner of your eye kind. Full sensory hallucinations, visual and sometimes auditory, indistinguishable in the moment from reality. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational judgment, impulse control, and distinguishing reality from imagination, becomes so severely impaired that the boundary between what is happening and what your exhausted brain is generating begins to genuinely dissolve. Dr. Matthew Walker, the neuroscientist and author of Why We Sleep, whose research at the University of California, Berkeley has extensively documented the cognitive effects of sleep loss, has described this stage as functionally indistinguishable from acute psychosis. The sleep-deprived brain at this stage cannot reliably tell you what is real. This is not exhaustion anymore. This is a genuine, measurable breakdown in the basic architecture of perception itself. Paranoia typically deepens alongside the hallucinations. Sleep-deprived subjects in controlled studies have reported believing researchers were conspiring against them, that ordinary sounds were threatening, that harmless objects held sinister meaning. This is not a character flaw or weakness. It is what an underslept prefrontal cortex does when it loses the ability to regulate the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, which becomes hyperactive and essentially unsupervised without adequate sleep to keep it in check. If this continued indefinitely, rather than the 11 days Randy Gardner endured before finally sleeping again, we would be entering territory that medical science has only observed in one truly catastrophic and mercifully rare condition: fatal familial insomnia. This is a genuine, documented genetic disease, one of the rarest and most horrifying conditions in all of medicine. It is caused by a prion, a misfolded protein that progressively destroys the thalamus, the brain region that regulates sleep. Patients with this condition experience exactly the progression we have described, but with no possibility of ever sleeping again, ever, for the remainder of their lives. The disease was first documented and extensively studied by Italian neurologist Dr. Ignazio Reuter and later by American researchers, including Dr. Daniel Gajdusek, who studied prion diseases extensively and received the Nobel Prize in Physiology for his broader work on this class of illness. Patients with fatal familial insomnia progress through stages remarkably similar to what we have described, but without end. Insomnia deepens over months. Panic attacks and paranoia set in. Hallucinations become constant. Patients lose significant weight because the body, unable to rest and repair, essentially begins consuming itself. Eventually, patients enter a state resembling a persistent waking dream, unable to distinguish sleep from wakefulness because the brain structure that would normally separate the two has been destroyed. Death typically occurs within 18 months of symptom onset, and there is, at present, no cure. This is the terrifying answer buried inside our hypothetical. Total, permanent sleep deprivation is not survivable. It is, in the most literal sense, a genuine terminal condition, and the only human beings who have ever experienced its full, uninterrupted course did not choose it. It happened to them through a cruel genetic accident, and every single one of them died from it. Why does something so seemingly passive, so seemingly optional, carry consequences this severe? Because sleep is not the absence of activity. It is one of the most biologically active processes your body performs. During deep sleep, your brain activates what researchers, including Dr. Maiken Nedergaard at the University of Rochester, have called the glymphatic system, a kind of biological pressure washing process that flushes cerebrospinal fluid through your brain tissue, physically clearing out metabolic waste products, including beta amyloid, the protein strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease. This cleaning process happens almost exclusively during sleep, and research published in the journal Science has shown that brain cells actually shrink slightly during deep sleep, specifically to allow more fluid to flow through the spaces between them. Without sleep, this cleaning never happens. Waste accumulates. Toxic proteins build. The very physical structure of your brain begins to degrade under a chemical burden it was never designed to carry without relief. Sleep is also when your body consolidates memory, moving information from short-term storage into long-term, stable neural architecture, and when growth hormone is released to repair tissue damage accumulated throughout the day. Without sleep, none of this happens. You do not simply feel tired. You stop repairing. You stop consolidating. You stop cleaning. Every system that depends on this nightly maintenance cycle begins, slowly and then catastrophically, to fail. So what if you never slept again? The honest answer is that you would not get to find out what a permanently sleepless life looks like, because there would not be enough time. Within days, your mind would begin generating a reality indistinguishable from psychosis. Within weeks, if some miraculous version of you somehow avoided the fate of fatal familial insomnia patients and simply continued without ever sleeping, your immune system would have already begun a slow collapse. Your brain would already be accumulating the toxic waste it can normally clear only during rest, and the very perceptual boundary between what is real and what your exhausted mind is inventing would already have begun, quietly and permanently, to dissolve. You lie down tonight, close your eyes, and sleep arrives, the way it always has, without you ever having to ask it to. Tomorrow, you will wake up, and your brain will have spent the night cleaning itself, repairing itself, and sorting through everything you lived that day, all without your permission or awareness, because it has always known something you have probably never stopped to consider. Sleep was never the boring part of your day. It was the part keeping every other part of you alive.